everyone. In this video we're going to talk about counter-controlled repetition using the for loop, which is one of three different styles of loops that you can use in C++. So before we talk about the for loop specifically, I'd like to discuss there are really three essential components to a counter-controlled loop. And you'll see these across all the three styles of loops in C++. But one of them, the first one, very importantly, is you start with some sort of counter variable, which is an integer variable. Okay, and this will have a very specific starting point, like a starting value and an ending value. And we'll see that in action in just a moment. Also, in a counter-controlled loop, you will have a condition, or which is also a relational expression, using a relational operator. These are the relational operators: less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and so on. Note that equality, the equal to operator in C++ is a double equal sign, not a single equal sign like we've been used to, for most of our lives. So you have to watch that. Okay, so we have the counter variable, we have a condition. Again, we'll see all of this in play in just a moment. And very importantly, you have an increment. You're incrementing your counter variable as you go along. So let's use a for loop to fill the screen with diamond shapes, like 5,000 diamonds. We'll just fill the console with a bunch of diamonds. And, of course, we can make a diamond with the escape sequence, something like this. I believe it's \04. But, if I wanted to make 5,000 of those, it would be very cumbersome to even copy this line and paste it 5,000 times. So we can use a loop to accomplish this, and that's what loops do. They accomplish repetition in your program. They're used quite a lot in programming. It's a very important construct. So let's use a for loop to do it. And you know what? I like the for loop. I always start with this one because it's really hard to mess up. All of the essentials, the 1, 2, 3 here, are part of the basic syntax of the for loop. So it's really hard to leave one out or forget one, unlike the other two loops, which create a greater opportunity for errors, as we'll see later. But let's use a for loop. We start with the word for, and then we open a parenthesis, open a paren there, and we have to address our loop essential number 1, which is the counter variable. So you're going to create a little integer variable, and you can call it whatever you want. Why don't I call it counter here? Okay, you'll see your book uses little throwaway variable names like I or X or something like that, and that's fine. Those are not great variable names if you were storing something, like a person's name or the cost of an item or something like that. Then you would want to use better variable names, more descriptive variable names. But for a loop counter, just a single letter is a perfectly fine variable name, and I use those a lot, and your book will use them too. But let's call it counter just for the sake of this tutorial here. So we start with a counter variable, and we give it some kind of starting value, typically 0 or 1. So we'll start it at 0. All right, so that's our first essential there in the bag. And then we have to create a condition. And the value of counter, which we're starting at 0, is going to control the loop. And by control the loop, I mean dictate whether or not the code inside the loop is going to run. So we have to set up a relational expression. We want 5,000 diamonds, I said. So we want to keep looping while counter is less than 5,000. Okay, so counter is going to start at 0, and because it's a less than, we're actually going to keep looping. The ending value of counter is going to be 4,999 because it is just a less than. You need to be careful of that. If I set it up like this, then I would get 5,001 diamonds. Okay, so watch that relational operator there. Now, if I did this, start counting at 1, then I would go less than or equal to 5,000. That'll give me an exact 5,000. So like I said, you got to be careful of those off by 1 errors. So we'll go back to the basic one that I had here. And so that's our second essential. That's our relational expression. And now our third essential is to increment. Counter has got to change. The value has got to change. Otherwise, it'll never reach this 5,000, and the loop keeps going and going and going. So let's increment counter, and you know from your previous unit that the plus plus, if you add plus plus to a variable, it will increment that variable value by 1. So that's the increment of counter. Okay, so finally, here's the body of the loop. This is really what we call the loop header. And then this will be the body of the loop here. And we're going to print our diamond. That ought to do it. Typically, you would use double quotes around a string, but this is an escape sequence. You could probably get away with the single quotes. Whatever. You could have done double quotes on that as well. That's not important. Okay, so there are 5,000 diamonds. Okay. One thing I'd like to point out here is, you know, some loops, a lot of loops you'll see in your book have a curly brace body. Okay. Typically, well, you know what? Let's say I wanted to do diamonds and hearts. I'm going to get rid of these curly braces. Okay, let's say I want to do diamonds and hearts. So I want a diamond and a heart, and so on. That'll be the pattern 5,000 times. So I actually have 10,000 things on the screen because we're doubling up on characters. So the heart is this. All right, watch what happens. Oh, I'm still running here. Watch what happens. Okay, this is interesting. If you can see, I have all these diamonds, no hearts, and then finally at the end, I have 1 heart. That's not what I wanted. I want diamond and a heart alternating. So the problem here is if you don't put a loop body in curly braces, then the compiler, the C++ compiler, assumes a 1 statement loop body. So this is our loop, what I have selected here. And then this part, the heart, is left out in the cold. So that's just like, you know, when the loop is done, it just goes on to the rest of the program and executes the rest of the program. So this is like just a line on its own that would only go 1 time. So if you want, you know, if you have more than 1 statement in your loop body, then you have got to put curly braces around that. And that's what we'll do. Okay, so now we have our alternating diamonds and hearts. My advice on curly braces is always put them, even if you just have a 1 statement loop body. If you just get in the habit of throwing down those curly braces in a pair and then going and typing inside, then you're never going to have that problem where, you know, the 1 line gets left out in the cold, because your loop will always be contained by curly braces, even if it doesn't have to be, because it's not a big deal if you add them and you didn't really need them, but it is a big deal. I have all these windows open down here. It is a big deal if you need them and you don't have them. So always add them. That's my advice. Here's another thing I want you to be careful of. I see students doing this a lot. You know, we're used to a lot of C++ statements ending in a semicolon, so students will do that. Watch this. I get 1 diamond. All right, so this is a really common error to make. Basically, and this is weird, this is what your compiler assumes. You can have a semicolon just sitting there like that on a line, and that is like a it's like a nothing statement, but it's still a code statement. It just doesn't do anything. It's like a useless code statement. So basically, this is your entire loop. You have the loop header, And this becomes your loop body. So this is what the compiler sees as your loop, which is basically do nothing for 5,000 times and then print a diamond. And so that's what you see with the one diamond. It executed the loop, it ran 5,000 times, but it did absolutely nothing. Okay, so you need to be careful of that. You don't put a semicolon at the end of your loop header. You need to just watch it. Okay, the last thing I want to show you in this example is, we printed the 5,000 diamonds. What if I wanted to print numbers 1 through 5,000? Well, that's easy because we have counter. Well, it starts at 0 in this case. Well, watch when I print the value of counter. And I want these to be separated by a space, not all running together. So let's print 5,000 numbers. Okay, so we printed the value of counter. Look here, it starts at 0, ends at 4,999 because, we started counter at 0. And we mentioned that because we're less than 5,000, then the, counter's ending value is 4,099. So if we change that, if I want numbers 1 through 5,000, there we go. Starting at 1 and ending at 5,000. So there you go. That's the for loop. We talked about the loop essentials and the fact that all of those essentials, this is essential number 1, the counter variable and its starting value, initial value. This is essential 2 here, which is the condition or the relational expression that uses a relational operator. And then finally the increment. So all of those essentials are part of the loop header, which makes it a really good one to start out with because you really keep yourself in check because, the basic syntax contains all of these important things and you can't forget any of them.